for my committee members. Okay, welcome back. We're in House Human Services and we are taking up, I'm sorry, the number of the bill, Representative Burrows?
H861.
H861 regarding the creation of an Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator position within state government. And this is a drive-by bill of a bill that came out of House General, excuse me. And we have the reporter of the bill with us today. So welcome, Representative Burrows. And this is on our committee page. So members, you can find it there, as well as the amendment from appropriations.
Oh, it's already there?
That's what my committee assistant tells me. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me in to talk about this bill. For the record, my name is Elizabeth Burrows, and I represent Windsor 1, which is Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor. This bill, the purpose of this bill is to really, at long last, address the state's inconsistent fidelity to the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'll read you some of the data that I put together. More than 1/4 of Vermonters have at least one disability. That makes us legion. Roughly 60% of all of the Human Rights Commission's cases are related to disability discrimination. Approximately 59% of adults with a mobility disability and 65% with a co-disability in Vermont earn less than $25,000 a year, which means they are reliant on state agencies for support. And those supports may be spread across several agencies without coordination or consistent understanding of the Americans with Disabilities Act. For example, HR deals with employment, while BGS deals with building accessibility, while the Agency of Transportation obviously deals with transportation issues. And then there are other agencies we know, especially in your committee, you know, that provide other services. And those are dealt with completely separately. The application of the Americans with Disabilities Act is siloed, and it may be an add-on to a position. In many states, the ADA requires that an employer with 50 employees or more must have an ADA person on staff. But it does not require that that person be a separate position. So the application is really uneven, and the training may be completely inconsistent or a one-time training, or it really varies from agency to agency and department to department, and also in our towns. This position creates a permanent and authoritative voice for 1/4 of our population that's left out of decisions that are made about them. It creates a hub for consistent ADA training and procedures at all state agencies and even at municipalities, which helps municipalities and agencies and our state to avoid costly lawsuits. It creates the ability to locate grants that are actually available that we don't have consistent access to for compliance and upgrades. It creates the ability to, it could create a way for municipalities of any size to grow capacity to address disability by pooling and coordinating resources on a larger scale. It could save municipalities a lot of time and money. It saves money through efficiencies within state government by coordinating programs between and among agencies. It saves money through lawsuit avoidance from non-adherence. It provides, it prevents complaints for state agencies and municipalities through prioritized planning. It also, it educates all levels of government, governance on ableism, which also saves money. And it creates a level of accountability where none currently exists. And it provides advisory resources and capacity for our legislature. I'll come back to that one in just a second. It could provide guidance on digital access and adherence to the new federal rules that are currently in effect. An example of how it could provide advisory resources for the legislature. This is just from last week. There was a group of students at Dartmouth who did a really great presentation on accessible housing in the Upper Valley where I live. And they had their, they write their research, and then one of their conclusions was for our legislature to add money to the Vermont Center for Independent Living. And I thought while I was sitting there, my brain went clickety click, and I thought, well, we already have that at VHIP. We in our committee added this pool of money to VHIP for people to be able to upgrade their homes to make them more accessible. It's not a ton of money, but it helps. And I thought, wow, if we had had a state coordinator, they could have put those two pieces together, that VHIP has not dispersed this funding because they had not agreed on what the definition of what the upgrade would be. And then Vermont Centers for Independent Living didn't have the funding. And yet, if we had had a state coordinator, we could have had someone say, when we were working on the VHIP proposal, maybe you guys should get together and coordinate here. That would have unblocked both of those entities from where it would have encouraged collaboration between those two, and that flow of money could have come more easily. And that's just an example of, being high up enough in governance to be able to have a perspective on the whole picture at all of the different levels. So that's my pitch.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. So I noticed, first off, when I did a scan through the bill, you had mentioned something about advice to municipalities. I don't see that in the bill. Is it there and I'm just not seeing it?
It's not explicit in, but it was about all levels of governance in the state.
Okay.
That was in there.
The only reason I say that, because that would have been a problem for me, to be honest, because we would be creating an expectation that we would not be able to fulfill if we included all municipalities. We just, the ethics board or whatever it's called is an example of that, which they've essentially closed down, and now it's supposed to be a place where municipalities are able to access. Anyways, so I didn't want to recreate what we already identified. So
and really, like if the position, if you think about it, if the position is creating trainings for people and it's all state workers, then there's no reason why municipalities couldn't
access it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then my other question is on page 2, where it talks about the hiring of the position, shall consider only those candidates nominated by the following entities. So have a problem with the entities. I'm just wondering, does that mean that they are going to get together and they're going to give a slate of candidates? Or does that mean each one is going to say, well, we have this person over here who we can recommend for the position, and then all four of them do that?
Yeah, we talked about that in our committee, and we purposefully left it vague because
So they could decide to get together if they wanted
Could get-
to, or they could just issue their own recommendations.
yes, and those entities work together often in this area, so they either will or it doesn't really matter as long as there are qualified candidates that have been vetted by those groups.
And some of them are, I guess I would describe one, like the Coalition for Disability Rights is, I guess I would loosely describe it as a group. It used to be something much different than what it is now. So,
Yeah, right.
okay. Other questions from, committee members about this? Yeah.
Just trying to see where this individual will be, like, in state government,
In the AOA.
in the
Secretary of
AOA.
Administration.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that's on,
Sorry.
that's right, page, well, it's on
right
page
in the
2, and it's right at the
beginning.
beginning, yeah.
Okay.
Line 13 on page 1. Yeah,
I guess a statement and then a question. You referenced how there are people within different agencies and departments that are doing some of this work sometimes, or probably most frequently as an add-on to something else that they're doing. So for me, seeing this position, I think it would amplify what they are doing in a good way and strengthen what they're able to do and build up stronger resources. And I think it's good that there's sort of tentacles out into different, that'll be improved by a central coordinator. Question with respect to what was it? The overseas self-evaluation processes.
That's
What-
required by the ADA.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about
Yeah, the ADA requires that entities with 50 employees or more
that?
do a self-evaluation and a self-inventory of how they're doing with regards to adherence to the ADA. When you think about self-evaluation, and you think about really a self-evaluation for a department for whom ADA compliance is an add-on. And the potential for, let's just say the potential for the difference in fidelity to the ADA. And you think about, one department that's checking a box versus a department that genuinely, is geared towards providing autonomy for people and access to whatever programs they have. They're going to be self-evaluated completely differently. But if you have an overarching office that kind of walks through what that self-evaluation is supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like, it would help provide consistency across all of those entities.
Representative Fun.
Yeah, thank you for this. I'm curious if you're envisioning this coordinator convening the appropriate state agencies that kind of have some role in ensuring compliance. And if that should be if you're envisioning like a convening like twice a year to kind of come together to make sure that we're doing all the things that compliance, we're identifying gaps, we're thinking about education and all that. And if that's the case, should that be explicit?
We did talk, I had in the original, so first it was a short form that was maybe one sentence long. And then it was a long form that had the whole kitchen sink and everything else in it. And then we pared it back down. And we decided that we didn't want to be too terribly prescriptive in the beginning because it is an enormous job.
Mhm.
And it will be an enormous job for a good couple of years. And we wanted to be able to allow that person to prioritize how they need to in the beginning. Then we could go back and, change it as it goes along, but we don't want them to get stuck. Originally, it had this person fielding calls from individuals, but it was like, no, don't do that. Don't set them up for failure. Just let them do the prioritizing. They're going to be at a high enough level that they will have the power to do that.
Thank you.
So we did list, that they are to work with the other agencies and organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you give, there's a list of 10 different things that provides direction, but, is not overly prescriptive.
Yeah.
When you said it's a big job, that's, part of a little bit of my concern, to be honest with you. That, much as we've seen in these other offices that we have created, so Office of Child, Youth and Family Advocate, Office of Racial Equity,
Yeah.
Office of, the one I was referring to at the beginning, conflicts of interest.
So the ethics.
Ethics, the ethics board or whatever it's called, that we can't keep up with the volume of work that then, the individual undertakes. I'm not saying that's not a reason to
And
consider, let me just finish.
I'm sorry.
To consider the position. I just think that it's, it makes me wonder, I guess, about how we could make the job doable without necessarily expecting in 2 years' time for them coming back and saying, there's no way I can possibly do all this. And, with one person. And while I see, they have the support, legal, administrative, et cetera, support of the Agency of Administration, that's not the support to actually do these 10 things across all of state government. So that concerns me a little bit. But just statement. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I believe that there is quite a bit of federal funding that's being brought to the table. It's not being accessed. But when a state does undertake to upgrade to adherence to the ADA, the federal government does have a pool of money that can be provided for that, and we're not accessing it right now. So it could be that once the person gets in there, however they decide to prioritize it, they might be able to partially self-fund their own office
Mhm.
for some of that activity.
Because that's the one thing it doesn't say. that
Yeah, I was gonna
too.
say, should we say something about like looking for, like, that should be one of their main responsibilities, to identify grants that are available, or at least prioritize the things that we need to be in compliance with to make us eligible for those grants.
Yeah,
I would argue that would be, I like the idea of that, but do we require, how many other officers do we require for functions you want to carry out to self-fund themselves? I wonder, would we want to say,
yeah, I'm not necessarily thinking about
Self-funding, yeah, I wasn't thinking about self-funding, I was just thinking money on the table, like if there is available funds that we can have access to, if we do X, Y, and Z, I would feel like that should be a priority, or at least it should be stated that this is what we want this person to be working on as one of their charges.
Rep. Noise.
Yeah, we did allow the Office of the Child Advocate to write grants and to look for funding, but we didn't prescribe, say, you should be doing this. We just provided them to be able to write grants because the money would go, any grants they got would go directly to the Office of the Child Advocate. And maybe some language around giving them the ability to apply for grants might be helpful. in that same.
Yeah, Representative Cole.
I'm wondering, Rip Rose, if there have been other times in the legislature when we have discussed better maximizing our drawdown of those specific federal funds that you were talking about through any vehicle whatsoever.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question? Or
Sure.
rephrase the question, I guess?
Oh, yeah.
Are you meaning with specific regard to ADA?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
grants in general, just have there been opportunities or places where we have asked other organizations within state government to be accessing those potential grant funds? I mean, when you said I believe, I think we need maybe something a little more definitive than I believe. Like, I don't personally know whether there are grants or there aren't grants. And there may very well be.
I do know that one example is the digital upgrade, because
Yeah.
I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that the rules changed and the federal government provided funding for digital upgrades. We have not taken advantage of,
Mm.
and it's actually pretty clear from our website that it's not.
In terms of making our websites more accessible
Yeah.
to individuals, yeah. Thank you for that example. Okay, so I think, folks, I would have you pull up the appropriations amendment. That it actually does something unique. It doesn't actually pull the money out. It just says that the position would be authorized if there is money appropriated. So that means essentially they're moving the bill along. The appropriations process is not complete. And so it's a contingent, essentially. So just wanted to make you aware of that, which is a little bit different than what they have. To me, that says they saw the importance of the bill and of the position, but can't guarantee that there's going to be funding for it.
Yeah, they want to, it was my understanding, they want to get it through the House, have it go through the Senate process, including some other, we don't know what committee it would go to in the Senate per se. Go through the Senate process. And then if it gets through all of that, then maybe at the end, during the budget reconciliation process, maybe funding would be
It'd
fun.
be up for discussion at least, all right? Okay. So how are members feeling? So, I'm wondering if we should be explicit about the, giving, sort of along what Rep. Noyes was saying, giving them authorization to apply for grants, not necessarily.
I was trying to find that.
Not necessarily, it's not intending, Rep. Bishop to make them have to self-fund, but to enable us to further, provide accessibility. And I appreciate the example that you gave, Rep. Burrows, because, when people think accessibility in the general public, they do not think about language. They don't think about how things are written. We do in this committee, you'll often see in some of our bills written in plain language, things like that. But, in general, population, when you say accessibility, they're always thinking about physical accessibility, which of course is very important, but it's not the only thing when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah.
So, I think, of course, this is what is it, 30 years now? 50 years, I think it's 30 years, the ADA. And I would say Vermont has been behind the times in terms of how many other states did you say had some similar type of position?
It's interesting. Not exactly. I can't remember, but it is somewhere around 15 other states.
Yeah.
And they are either very populous or very unpopulous. So some of them are, populous and it's therefore unwieldy for them. And some of them are unpopulous and just have not addressed it.
Yeah.
And I think that, the part of the thing to me is that we don't, as a state, necessarily understand that the ADA is a baseline, and it's supposed to be for autonomy. It's not an add-on. It's not like as I was saying to the appropriations committee, like yesterday when the back elevator was down, I'm not like whining about the elevator being broken again. I can't get down to the mezzanine and therefore I can't, or when this elevator is down, I can't get up here.
Yeah.
Like it actually prevents me from being able to, and people don't really think about that. They think that I'm complaining about the elevator being, and then the elevator problem and
Yeah.
this and that, but it actually is, prevents me from being able to effectively.
The public housing, and not just public housing, I have a place in Waterbury right now where, Down Street Housing, one of their buildings has had an out of service elevator off and on for, weeks now.
Yeah.
And literally, people who utilize a wheelchair are not on the first floor. And they've not been able to get out of the building.
I've heard the same in Lemoyle County.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened in Montpelier last,
Yeah, happened
right at the end of the session.
Just right around the corner. So it's an issue. It for sure is an issue. And I'm not sure what we can do about elevator repair people, but so I.
Yeah, it's
I
not,
appreciate that.
the issue is not the elevator. The issue is the access and the like,
Exactly.
autonomy. I mean, really, it's about autonomy.
Yeah, yeah.
Being able to just live without having to ask for everything.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Representative
just a
Meyer.
quick question. First, my apologies for being tardy. I appreciate you being here. In the hiring for the coordinated positions, secretary and administration shall consider only those candidates nominated by the four entities, and the candidate also has to have lived experience. I'm just wondering where the rationale was coming in regards to just those four agencies can select, and also how are they going to be able to assess lived experience? How's that being defined?
Well, that came from the idea of nothing about us without us, right? Being actually, because there is no actual voice or authority for people with actual people with disabilities. So the idea is to create that, right? And so it is a unique hire, like literally unique hiring process. But that is in part because it is a voice. Because it should not be a person who does not have that lived experience to be in that position.
Oh, no, I agree with, the person having that lived experience. I was just getting at, you have these four agencies that you listed shall consider only those candidates nominated by these four agencies, and then the person is a coordinator with the lived experience. I agree with all that. My concern is how are the candidates that are going to be nominated from only those four entities going to assess what tools going to be utilized to assess that lived experience?
Since you can't really ask about disability when you're interviewing.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I would like put it out.
Yeah, no, I don't know, my head
Right,
goes.
And if that is a requirement of the job description, then one would think that
Applicants would self-identify.
applicants would
Yeah.
self-identify.
Yeah. So we have a couple of options, folks. I've heard some question about whether or not we want to authorize the position to seek available grants to help implement the responsibilities of the job. Or we could, act on it as it's presented. So what's the, and we have another witness, so our lunch is going to be a little late, just letting you know. What's people's pleasure? Why don't we hold on this?
Yeah.
Is this, what's the schedule for the floor? Is this on the floor today?
No, if it gets
Okay.
through appropriations today, then it'll be on the floor on Friday.
Okay, all right. We don't need to do it right now.
We don't have possession.
Well, we can still do an amendment.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Representative Rose. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much
Appreciate
for hearing me.
Thank you for bringing this bill forward. We appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, it's
Uh,
huge. I mean, you might not realize how huge it is, but it is so huge.
I do realize how huge it is, which
Mhm.
is actually awesome, giving me some concern, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Okay.
No, I mean, I just mean, it's huge for the disability community. to
Oh, yeah, to see it.
Really be here is the thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, Aaron, thank you so much, and my apologies for being a little tardy here. Our schedule has kind of gotten a little kaflooey. Good morning.
Good morning. It is still morning, so.
It is
we're
still
under
morning.
the wire.
So I'm not sure if you have seen the draft that dropped this morning of the bill.
I just saw it, did a quick skim of it.
Okay, so the floor is yours. I'm just going to, I don't think we need to go through all of we know about First Children's Finance, so you don't need to give us the background, but,
Okay.
excuse me, my apologies. So floor is yours, Aaron.
Thank you. For the record, though, I will introduce myself. My name is Erin Roach. I'm the Vermont Director of First Children's Finance. So I'll skip the preamble about First Children's Finance. And there is written testimony that I submitted this morning. I'm not going to read it all because time. But I do want to hit a couple of things that I think are just important to note, thinking about the proposed legislation. And Chair Wood had asked me to talk about sort of increased capacity for universal pre-K. And while we don't track that specifically, I did want to put it in sort of the context of how preschool spaces and universal pre-K spaces increase as infant and toddler spaces increase. So I just thought it would be helpful for all of you to have that context. So thank you for having me, and thank you for considering all these things about universal pre-K. Listening to the witness that just stopped, I feel like doesn't feel as monumental as people getting access to all the things that they need, but getting access to universal pre-K is also important for the young children in Vermont, and being able to do that in a way that meets the needs of young children and their families and what their family situations are is really important in terms of access and equity. So I appreciate this committee spending some time to really consider this issue. So I put some graphs in here. I feel like maybe you have some expectation that when I talk that I always bring graphs of data, and so I didn't want to disappoint in that way.
Actually, the one that shows by county is actually really, really helpful.
Yeah.
The one with the
That is
orange, the little
yeah,
orange bubble.
the little orange
Yeah.
dots. Yeah, that is really a really excellent visual.
I thought you would enjoy that. And it comes from our supply and demand gap analysis report, which is an every 2 years report. Let's Grow Kids had produced it. They called it Stalled at the Start. We felt like that title wasn't appropriate anymore, and it's our report now. So we just called it the Supply and Demand Gap Analysis. So this is just the pre-K spaces there, but we also have a companion graphs for infants and toddlers. So if you're interested, the link to that report or to access that report is in this written testimony as well. We also produced 3 supplemental reports this year. One of them is about universal pre-K and preschool age spaces. One of them is about part-time childcare spaces, because the supply and demand analysis is really just full-time spaces. So I wanted to call your attention to just below that little orange bubble graph. There's a very small table. And what it shows is that the vast majority of public universal pre-K programs are part-time programs. That is less than 48 weeks a year and or 40 hours a week. And the vast majority of privately operated programs are full-time programs. And so I don't say that as like a judgment on anything. I just think it's really important as the committee is thinking about 3s and 4s and hours and access and equity to understand what the current where the current system looks like. And I also want to mention that this having different choices for different children and their needs and different families and their needs is really important. We have focused mostly on full-time childcare, infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. But there are families that don't need or want full-time childcare. They might only want universal pre-K when their child is 3 or 4 years old, and they might only want it for a few hours a week, and then everything in between. And so it's really important that there be choices that meet what families and particularly their young children need. So just wanted to make that quick point. And then I know you all are interested in sort of equity of access. And so there's a table on the next page, on page 3, that shows the percentage of children who are 3 or 4 years old that by county, that based on the number of universal pre-K spaces in that county would be likely to have access to universal pre-K. And you can see it varies from a low of 61% or 55% in Franklin County to a high of 95% of preschool age children in Windham County having access to some kind of universal pre-K. And that, to be clear, that is part-time, full-time, private, public, but it is universal pre-K. So it means that those spaces meet that state definition of universal pre-K. It's not just preschool spots.
So can I ask a question about that,
course.
Erin?
Yeah.
And maybe I just need to understand the differences between your chart here and what we heard from Building Bright Futures.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be different. And maybe
So,
maybe they just seem to be different to me, and maybe I'm not understanding how they compare, or are they saying different things? That's what
I'm so glad you asked the question. Sorry to interrupt. Actually, in that first page of my preamble that I sort of skipped, I noted that Dr. Morgan Crossman had given testimony last week. She talked about the number of children enrolled in universal pre-K and whether they were public or private and et cetera. This is the number of spaces that there are. It has nothing to do, and we have the number of children in the population, but we're not making any statement about how many of those children are enrolled in anything. This is just a number of spaces if they wanted to be enrolled. Does that?
no, that's helpful. That, I mean, one of the things that, families have choices about whether they enroll their children, and and they still will have that choice. And we're wanting to just make sure that they, if they choose to make that choice to have UPK, that they will be able to reasonably find something, whether in public or private, in their area. And as you said, it varies, but it's not as why there's big variability. I mean, between 55 and 95 or 93. It's not it's not as bad as I had in my head. Right. Yeah.
I mean, it does suggest that most children in the state would have access if they wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
The other data I wanted to bring, and this the 2026 cost of care report is something that First Children's Finance national team did. It was contracted with by the Child Development Division. This is also available on our website, and the link is available there. I just pulled one graph from that. It's a much longer report, and there's a lot more detail about assumptions and what they mean by cost of care. But I wanted to just make one point, which is, if you look on page 4, the graph shows that for centers of any size, so there's small, medium, and large centers, and then family child cares, that care for infants and toddlers is sort of a loss leader for any size center. They don't make money. In fact, they would likely lose money on infants and toddlers. They make back money on preschool and school-age children. And so it's really important, I think, for this committee to understand that any change to the system, even if sort of in the long term it's neutral or positive, will have a really will have a big short-term effect, because we're talking about businesses with not much in cash reserves that, like I said, even a change that ultimately might be for the positive might really put a lot of stress on that system in the short term. And so I just would urge the committee to think about that as you're making changes. The other thing I wanted to point out that's not in my written testimony, because I hadn't seen the proposed bill when I was writing this, is that I want to just make sure everybody understands that universal pre-K and childcare financial assistance are not interchangeable. That even if the funding amounts are similar, they are differently accessed. So universal pre-K says, if you find a universal pre-K space, the state will pay for your 10 hours. Childcare financial assistance is a means tested program. You have to be below a certain income. You have to demonstrate that the caregivers are in the workforce or are in like full-time education or have some other kind of service need. So not every 3-year-old is eligible, or a 4-year-old for that matter, is eligible for childcare financial assistance in the same way they would be for universal pre-K. I want to make sure everybody understands that shifting the way 3-year-olds universal pre-K is paid for could have some unintended consequences, because those 3-year-olds might not be eligible to have that paid for by the state. And the second point that's slightly related is I noticed in the proposed legislation it talks about 4-year-olds getting 20 hours of universal pre-K. I'm going to just mention, and if you were to read this cost of care report, you could better understand that most private and even some public schools will blend universal pre-K and childcare financial assistance funding to provide for a longer day or a longer week of hours. To get full-time childcare financial assistance, you need to have a need for care 26 hours or more. And so if you were needing 40 hours of care and now you get 10 hours of universal pre-K, you would still be eligible for a full-time 30-hour certificate. But if you change that and you put them at 20 hours and they have a need for 40 hours of care, they'll only be eligible for a 20-hour certificate, and that's not a full-time childcare certificate anymore. And so I just would urge you to consider the implications on families that need full-time childcare in addition to universal pre-K, and how changing the number of hours that come from universal pre-K will have effects on how much childcare financial assistance that family might be eligible for. And then I guess 2 last points. One is that because you were interested in how capacity for universal pre-K increases, we did a quick analysis of all the grants we've given out over the last couple of years. And we looked at, so these are infant and toddler capacity building grants. So you can only get a grant if you're adding infant or toddler spaces. But we looked at how many of the spaces those projects add, and how many of them are universal pre-K spaces or preschool age spaces. And I just wanted you to see that, for centers, 47% of the spaces that the projects included were universal pre-K spaces.
So is that 47% of the 36%?
No, it's 40 of the programs that are universal pre-K pre-qualified. 47% of their spaces in these projects were for preschool spaces. And so my point is really that preschool spaces come along with infant and toddler spaces, no matter that we're not funding them. We're only funding the infant and toddler spaces, that the economics in that previous slide about cost of care are such that if you're adding infant spaces, you're almost always adding preschool spaces too.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, what the testimony you're giving is, this is a new piece, this little piece, right? You're talking about here. We've heard from, multiple witnesses about essentially the older kids subsidize the younger kids,
Yeah.
in terms of that in childcare, facilities. Yeah, we're pretty familiar with that, unfortunately, that dynamic. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just in closing, I would urge you to hear from people who are actually in the field. I think the expert testimony is really helpful at a broad level, but I think universal pre-K coordinators and school principals and childcare directors are probably able to speak to what the likely impact of any of these changes would be, in a way that I'm only just trying my best. So anyway,
Thank you
for having
so-
me. I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much, Erin. I appreciate that. Appreciate this and appreciate the information that you've provided and the links to the bigger document. That's very helpful.
Of course.
And honestly, appreciate the presence of First Children's Finance in Vermont and all that you're doing to be part of our, grand project to increase access to childcare and early learning for our youngest kids. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. Act 76 has been amazing, and I am no end of grateful to have been part of that implementation. It's just been an amazing experience. So thank you for all of your consideration.
Awesome. Okay, folks, thank you, Erin. We will, the floor, and then did anybody see the estimate from Betsy Ann? Oh, all right, so we will not be meeting at this point. We are likely to, watch your emails and texts. I'll put it on both, but we may have to meet early tomorrow. That may be the only time we're able to get JFO. We're still trying to work that out. So when I say early, that it wouldn't be before 8:30, but it would be like 8:30. So to be arranged. Okay, great. We'll see.